Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. Inside the Set is a series that focuses on the design and decor of stories that excite us and ignite our imaginations, where we get to discuss the collaborations between production designers and set decorators, and hear firsthand accounts of how those works of art came to be, from their inception, ideas on a page, through completion, where we sit in the dark and experience them collectively.
Welcome to Inside the Set with Set Decor. My name is Cathy Marshall, SDSA. Joining me here today are set decorator Kyra Friedman, Curcio, SDSA, and production designer Jonathan Guggenheim, specifically to discuss their collaboration on the exciting new film, American Fiction. Welcome, Kyra and Jonathan. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Well, great. Before we get into the film, can each of you share a little bit about how you got your start in the film business and the process that got you here today?
I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and so I wanted to go to the School of the Arts. I had a handful of friends that went there, but I was quite the wandering mind at that young age and didn't get my portfolio together. So I ended up going to school at the University of North Carolina in Wilmington for communication studies with an emphasis on visual media. And they had a kind of a blossoming program there at the time that had a lot to do with media and video. So I got involved with that, which led me to the making my own films with some like-minded friends in college. And Wilmington, North Carolina had a pretty expanding, it had a film infrastructure. They still make a lot of TV shows and films down there. So I got involved in that way. I met a production designer who he's a friend now, and we kind of came up through the ranks, working with directors who graduated from the North Carolina School of the Arts, and then found our way coming up through the Sundance labs.
And how about you, Kyra?
I grew up in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and after a brief stint at NYU, I ended up at Mass Art. Studied art history and painting. Sort of knew I wanted to have a career that was creative, that I could, make a living doing. Thought I wanted to do photo styling, and then met a really good friend who's also a SDSA member, Amy Silver, who was like, "No, you want to decorate movies." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even know what that was." Like I grew up obviously watching, my dad took me to tons of movies and I always loved them. And I had some boyfriend who had me watch every Clint Eastwood movie ever. And I met Amy, and she was like, "No, you want to decorate movies. It's so much more interesting. It's about, telling stories and character." And so we started working for free a lot and doing independent films in Boston and anything that I could do. And basically ended up PAing for another great decorator, Tracy Doyle, who taught me my job, and ended up working with lots of various designers and decorators that would come to Boston and need just a piece of work done. And then the Boston film community grew, more work came, and I started decorating more. So it's been, quite a while, like 25, 30 years.
I'm always curious at the start of these things, how people kind of come into the business, what their path was, because there's so many different ways that people start doing what we do. And it takes kind of a culmination of all those talents to be really good at it. So I appreciate the background. So regarding this film, American Fiction is a comedy drama nominated for 2 Golden Globe Awards, and it was based on the 2001 novel ERASURE. The film follows a frustrated novelist professor named Monk, who becomes fed up with how the publishing industry profits from Black entertainment, and especially the offensive depictions of Black culture. How was the cultural concept presented to you both, and what kind of research did you do to deal with these topics visually through sets and locations?
Yeah, so I read the script and I was completely floored by the script. Cord is a fantastic writer, and he has a writer's mind. And so my first interview with Cord was illuminating. I mean, he was attempting to tell a very fresh story in a sarcastic way, but also filled with humanity. And he wrote these characters so beautifully. And to answer your question, I think it really was that early research. Initially, so the childhood home was initially written as a brownstone in Boston. And I had started referencing really that, the Harlem Renaissance and kind of that Black excellence, really, that opulence and that elegance, because that's what Cord wanted this film to be. He wanted it to have that air of prestige about it, an antiquated version of that. It's almost like he wanted it to feel aged out in a way, almost like a bygone era. So that old Harlem Renaissance brownstone look was my initial lookbook. And I think that's what I talked to Kyra about. And it wasn't until we really hit the ground running that we discovered the brownstones in Boston weren't really working for the choreography and the movement of the film. So we discovered that Victorian style house and kind of switched gears.
So it looked like you found a pretty fabulous location for this house. Is that correct? And what did you do to modify it? Or can you tell us a little bit about this set?
We had an incredible location manager, Stephen Hartman. I think Kyra's worked with him a handful of times, and it was my first time working with him, and he was awesome. His team was incredible. This was a small film, and so we just knew kind of from the get-go that we weren't going to have a ton of resources financially to throw at redoing a whole home. So I wanted to see as many locations as possible where there was already some production value built in. And once we abandoned the idea of a brownstone, we found this Victorian style home that was relatively untouched. It was a time capsule in a way. There was no building or painting in this house.
Wow.
Fortunately, the wallpaper really worked out really well for us.
Yeah.
I remember when Jonathan found the house, I was like, about some of it, but it really, I think it really fell into place.
It communicates that elegance you were talking about, Jonathan. And Kyra, it seems that you did an amazing amount with the artwork too.
Since we were tight with the budget, I really relied heavily on all of our local resources that we've used a lot. All the artwork here, it's a mixture of stuff from Child's Art Gallery in the background, and my friend's Karen from CRN Auctions, that's some of her art. It's like a frieze or something of her dog. But
I love that dog.
Some needle points, which, you can usually get away with those. They'll clear those. But we used Child's Art Gallery, a woman named Stephanie Bond. I've been working with her for years. And she really helped us with artwork that she knew she could clear. It's relatively contemporary artwork by Robert Freeman. And Jonathan actually paid him a visit in person, which sadly I missed. But anyhow, his artwork was phenomenal. And we used it for both houses, the summer beach house and the family home. So his artwork was super helpful, and I think helps tell the story of a family that's collected and helps create like a real place. Like I would say 85% of the set dressing in that house came from our only prop house, which is Westerman's. I have to give him a shout out, Dan Diaz. It's like a created real prop house by the film community, by a vendor who was originally a restaurant supply, used and new, who loved our local film industry and started working with us, collecting everything off of jobs and buying stuff. And so he really came through and helping us with the dressing.
Well, I thought your point too about tying the art into from the childhood home to the beach house was really a good one, because it felt like it was in the same family, and and that the beach house had a history of, family summers and stuff like that. So that definitely worked.
So this is the location at the beach, the house. And I remember one of the things, obviously, is all the wood tones and just making sure we could separate the people, the skin color, the background. And, obviously these like blues of the ocean came in here. We really had to bring a lot of stuff in to sort of break it up. And that's an original piece in the background, the china cabinet, which I remember asking if we could keep from the location. The family was nice enough to let it stay. It's nice that it has that like reflective quality, and the collected china, I think, really helps us in there.
And again, the artwork just totally reinforces her collections and how she brought it into the beach house. And it feels like it's been there for years.
The tone is just right in this house too. It was a tightrope walk getting this right, because even though the beach house needed to feel warm and inviting, there's also an air of sadness in the beach house. I mean, it's mentioned in the film as well as the book that this is where the father committed suicide. And so, that we kind of imagined that no one visited this house for many years after that traumatic incident happened. I mean, there was even talk of initially covering some of the furniture with blankets as a way to weather or winterize the place. But we felt like the nature of the wicker and everything just kind of existing felt right.
And even when we then see Coraline's house across the way, and the interior of her house was beautiful. I mean, I loved it, and it was very different, and it was kind of more personal to her character. And I thought you pulled that off quite nicely as well. How much of that was brought in and created?
Some of the basic stuff was there. I mean, I think we kept some of her living room furniture of the location, but once again, I will say, like, it's nice used to being able to like pull fabrics and work with a draper and all that kind of stuff. But this day was really like find the stuff that works and make it work. And I remember going to find the drapes like last minute at Westerman's and sort of trying to tell the story about her character being like a little bit more, bohemian, maybe a little bit more colorful, a different kind of palette.
Yeah. One of the things we were really trying to articulate was that, Scituate is such an interesting little coastal town. And one of the producers was just randomly from Scituate. And when we were scouting, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that we scouted somewhere between 40 and 50 beach homes. And that's just the beach house. Mm-hmm. And we needed a connectivity between these two houses. There was a lot of scene work that happened with Monk on the exterior of the house, where he was looking into the windows of Coraline's, and vice versa, where they're in Coraline's, and the moment that Agnes gets lost on the beach, there needed to be this connectivity to the beach and these two houses. And it was very difficult, actually, to find two houses across the street from each other. This house in particular, the Ellison family beach house, we were scouting this, and the producer, Ben LeClaire, was on the front porch, and a woman walked up and said, "Are you little Ben LeClaire?" And he said, "Oh my God, are you Miss so-and-so, my 7th grade art teacher?"
I love that.
She was like, "Yeah." And so that was truly one of the reasons we were able to use this house.
I love the house. I mean, the way it sits kind of out on the point there, and the beach is so close. I mean, it's a rare find, I would think.
It's very rare in the fact that Scituate gets hit hard by weather every year, and a lot of these homes are either deteriorated from years of being weathered and actually flooded, And then also you have the opposite problem where people just update the houses, and it's hard to find one with that kind of timeless integrity.
No, it was quite successful. So switching gears a little bit, when you in the beginning of the film, when you establish the publishing world, and we have the agent's office, Arthur, and then we contrast that with the publisher's pretty stark white office, and a lot of comedic moments in those choices as well. Can you talk about those a little bit?
Tough locations to lock down. We didn't actually have the Thompson Watt Publishing Company, the New York publisher office, until I want to say 24 hours before we were supposed to shoot it. It was kind of an open floor plan, and ultimately it had a visual contrast to Arthur's office that you see feels. We wanted Arthur's office to feel warm. We wanted the brick. We wanted the wood because it was in Boston, and we felt like we needed a stark contrast to a high-rise glass box that is a New York publisher. So it also a bit ramshackle, as you can see. I mean, the kind of a through line throughout the whole film was we kept coming to the word threadbare. That was a word that Cord used with really all of the characters. He wanted this elegance within the wardrobe and the sets, but for it to be threadbare, for it to have, kind of an aged look, but also real without being, over the top. So that was the biggest thing with Arthur's office and Paula's office, is that they just needed to be a stark contrast between these two spaces.
But what was the story about the artwork that you had created, right, Jonathan? The behind your desk.
Yeah, that was written into the script. He wanted Paula Baderman to really have this white allyship, but the faux version of that. And so it was written as there was a Black Lives Matter coffee mug and then RBG posters behind her in her office. And we did a couple of different scenarios with that artwork. But I had a friend who is an incredible graphic illustrator, and he created a likeness of Ruth wearing these huge boxing gloves. And it said like truth and justice on her boxing gloves. And he did it in red, green, and blue, different iterations of that, kind of like a pop art feel.
Right.
Well, I really loved the artwork and the graphics that you created, like for all the bookstores. You had a couple of different bookstores to deal with, or can you talk about those a little bit? They must have been huge dresses.
PTSD arises.
I mean, you had to create a lot of books and covers and all kinds. I mean, I was like thinking, boy, the graphics people were really good.
Yeah, I really don't want to go off into a negative rant, but I do have to say, when I first started this project, my mouth fell open when I saw that there was no graphic designer budgeted in the budget that I was handed, and I just really laughed out loud, because I was just talking to Kyra a little while ago, and she was like, who are our graphic designers? Well, we had 4 of them.
Right. But the graphics was hired out, right, Jonathan? And somebody specialized with the book covers.
Yeah, that's right. So specifically for the book covers, we did hire an actual book cover designer, and her name is Catherine Casalino. She works with all of the high-end publishers, and we interface directly with her. It was actually one of the best relationships I've ever had with a graphic person. Her gut instinct with these book covers, because it's what she does for a living, was so spot on. I mean, you were able to give her a color palette, and a general idea, and she really just ran with it. And one of my favorites is up there in the top right, the Hawes conundrum. I think I simply said, can you make this an amalgamation of how Paul Klee was essentially stripped of his nationality of being German because he was, gay and Jewish. And that was the cover she came up with, this like imposing swastika kind of overtaking his Klee art. And I just thought that was so impressive.
Yeah. I mean, the books played like such a major role. And so we had a set decorating coordinator and a couple, Augustus, our chief set decorating PA.
Who we also named the bookstore after.
Augustus. And but basically they spent tons of time in prep and production hitting up every publisher we could think of for promoted books, and cleared some of which I'm trying to remember. A lot of them obviously we got clearance for, but we're talking about thousands of books, right, from many different publishers. And it was incredible. It was one of those things where I had done a bookstore a really long time ago, and we had done it that way. And the whole time you're just sort of crossing your fingers that it's actually going to work out, because your backup plan is maybe to rent books. I think we were talking to the location that we shot the bookstore at, like we had to have a backup plan. But in the end, they promoted thousands of books, basically. What was the name of the bookstore? It's in Brookline. It's an actual bookstore.
It was called Brookline Bookstore, Brookline Booksellers.
They were great. There were all these little tags in there that we had to pull last minute, right, Jonathan? And move their books around and then put our books in. But
yeah, books are...
Yeah.
they're tough. They're tough because it comes down to a clearance issue every single time. It's like, all of that is artistic copyright. And, you can see, I guess the rule of thumb is you can see the spine of the book, but you can't see any artwork on the cover unless you've created it yourself. And so we were, it feels like cheating a little bit if all you're seeing is spines. And so you really want to see some of these book covers. And so we not only created our own, but I think it was important for these publishers to show up. I mean, they really, it was amazing what they sent to us. As Kyra said, thousands of books. The art department was pretty much just books.
Basically.
I'm sympathetic. I've been there. I think
it hung together pretty well that it was a location, but we added in real books and all these fabricated books. I think it works well, which is nice to see.
And some great signage too that sold the locations. I mean, it was well done. Are there any other sets specifically that you'd like to talk about? Any surprises that you encountered?
Well, I was surprised by, is it the end of the movie or whatever, the part that they did in LA that I didn't know that was you oversaw, right?
That's right. We had designed and decorated Monk's office at the university where he worked. And I loved that set. That was the first set we did together. I have a picture of Kyra just laughing hysterically within this space. And it was so cluttered, and there was papers everywhere and books stacked on books on stacked of books and pages opened. And it was a moment for us to see Monk in his own space, which you really don't see anywhere in the movie anymore. You only see him ever in a family setting or spaces that are not his own. So originally in the script, they're sitting there drinking whiskeys, and I guess it came off as a little too curmudgeon, is what I heard from the producers. It just wasn't. It wasn't funny enough, and it wasn't the tone that Cord wanted to set for the film. So they reshot the beginning and the end of the film, and one of the big finale without giving anything away, is that they did turn Monk's book into a film. And so it shows him pulling up on set. And this I pitched to Cord because I had just watched the Brian De Palma movie, Body Double, where there's an actor who is finishing up a scene. He walks out of the stage and into his blue convertible. And in the Brian De Palma film, they're pulling one of these backdrops away of a desert. And that's how he opens his film. Credits are rolling over this backdrop of a desert. And so I wanted to recreate that, but with the plantation home as the backdrop. So yeah, I guess that did come as a surprise to Kyra.
Yeah. But I just think it works out really well. So. But I wonder, like, we had used the author of the book, Percival Everett's artwork in the office, and I'm not sure then that maybe it's in the presentation, but I don't think I can't remember if we used it anyplace else in the movie. But
I did. I brought it back. I brought it back for the beginning of the film.
Oh, okay.
I wanted that to be a nod to Percival.
Right.
And so, originally it looked a lot, I think it looked a lot better in our version of it in the first office, but we did bring the Percival Everett's personal art into an admin office somewhere in the university.
Artwork is, like, I think Jonathan and I both agree, like, a really complicated, difficult part of telling a story, and you just want to get it right, and you don't want to have to print everything that's public domain, or it's just nice to have the options. And what chance is that going to happen that the author of the book that the movie is sort of based on has the artwork?
Percival is a really interesting guy. He shipped us his art overnight practically. I was a little worried that it wasn't going to arrive. Of course, then the scene was cut from the movie, so it didn't matter. But I guess one of the things too about making a film like this that is really, it's meditative and really it's a family drama. It's an ensemble piece, and you want the actors to shine in that way. But I think one of the trickiest narratives to follow is the money story in a movie like this, because the money and what people, their socioeconomic standing and financial standing is really what kind of dictates what things look like. And in the novel Erasure, he goes into great detail about the father and what the father did. He was a doctor, and the mother kind of took on this philanthropic presence. And we kind of imagined Agnes going off to she would show up in her most elegant dress wear to art openings, and she was a collector. And so going back to what Kyra says, like, we wanted all of the artwork to be original. It's mind-numbing to me when I'm watching a movie and I see a stock photo that they just blew up and framed. It's like, oh God, no! Because once you do this long enough and you have access to these stock photo websites, you start seeing things over and over again, and you know what's out there. And I just can't thank Kyra and Child's Gallery enough. I mean, Child's, not only did they have the artwork there, but they had the Rolodex of obviously living artists who are working and were able to give us names to who to hit up.
I do want to give just a little shout out to just some local vendors, and like the one vendor that I use repeatedly, City Knickerbocker in New York. I mean, we really didn't have the funds to reach out very far, but they always come in handy. And I do remember we used some City Knickerbocker rentals, and also Landry and Akari is one of our local really fabulous rug dealers that I remember pulling up to the house with like way too many rugs, but the rugs were really important in that house. And I remember Maddie, who's our art director, and I and the set dressers, really starting to rough in that set, which was awesome. And they loaned us, a whole minivan full of incredible carpets. And there was one other vendor. Oh, CRN Auctions. It's an auction house. Family friends of mine who let me into their homes, and Jonathan into their homes, to rent their actual really interesting pieces. So really, without the local support of the vendors, it would have been impossible. And also the great crew that we had. We sort of had a revolving cast of lead people, which was not easy, but we ended up with Chris Carnes sort of taking the helm. He did a great job. We had a buyer whose name is escaping me, who was awesome. So I think we really got lucky with our crew, and that's important because we couldn't have done it without them.
And I really appreciate you guys talking with us today and kind of explaining your process and how you collaborated and worked together. It was good. Quite good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Inside the Set with Set Décor. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and visit our website, setdecor.com.